Now, while Ukraine is still waiting in the wings, Sweden is all set to join the defense alliance. After months of blocking Stockholm's bid, Turkey has agreed to greenlight Sweden's accession. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg made the unexpected announcement on Monday evening after talks with Turkish and Swedish leaders ahead of the NATO summit. Turkey had been holding out against Sweden joining, accusing it of not being tough enough against Kurdish militants. Here's the NATO Secretary General.
I have just had a constructive meeting with President Erdogan and Prime Minister Kristersson. I'm glad to announce that as a result, President Erdogan has agreed to forward the accession protocol for Sweden to the Grand National Assembly as soon as possible, and work closely with the Assembly to ensure ratification. This is reflected in the joint press statement just agreed by President Erdogan, Prime Minister Kristersson and myself. The memorandum concluded a year ago at the Madrid summit has delivered. It has delivered more in our fight against terrorism, more security for Turkey, and a stronger NATO.
Sinan Cidi is a non-resident senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies and an expert on Turkish domestic politics and foreign policy. Mr. Cidi, welcome to the day. What do you make of this statement by NATO's Jens Stoltenberg? Were you surprised by Turkey's change of heart?
Well, this was kind of the high-stakes drama that some of us have actually been sort of mulling over for a while, thinking, well, he could say yes and he could say no, but we will not know until the Vilnius summit. And it looks like President Erdogan's rendered a decision at the 12th or 11th hour, depending on what your perspective is. But it'll be interesting to see what the details behind the agreement are, to see whether Turkey will actually realize some of its policy goal requests that it's had of Washington, from Washington, in return for actually greenlighting Sweden's membership.
Mm-hmm. It's also been announced that Erdogan will meet U.S. President Joe Biden tomorrow. So should we assume that that means Turkey has gotten what it wanted? And what does it want?
Well, it will be interesting to see if President Biden can deliver on his promises to Mr. Erdogan. He's been suggesting that in return for Turkey's greenlighting of NATO membership of Sweden, that Biden will use all of his sort of influence to try and convince the United States Congress to lift its objections for Turkey acquiring new fighter jets, specifically F-16s. I'm not sure that's necessarily quid pro quo, because the U.S. Congress does have considerable oversight and willpower whether Turkey gets these F-16 fighters or not. It will remain to be seen whether President Biden can actually convince congressional committees, specifically in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, to lift its present objections for Turkey receiving F-16 fighter jets.
Mm-hmm. So was this ever about Sweden and its attitudes towards Kurdish militants, or even about Turkish accession to the EU, something that he raised this morning, much to the surprise of his NATO allies?
In a word, no. Look, it's been, I think, if you look at it, this has been a very traumatic process for NATO. But I think from Turkey's perspective, it has been, I would argue, a disastrous diplomatic outreach, because, yes, they've greenlit Sweden's membership into NATO, as well as Finland's previously. But these two countries are not as necessarily going to be very sort of supportive of Turkey's ventures going forward, least of all Swedish support for Turkish European membership, which it was historically a fan of. I don't think that's going to be on the issue anymore. But also, look, there's considerable resentment on the part of Western allies towards Turkey for drawing this out for so long, particularly because it raises sort of existential questions on the future of the Western alliance. Specifically, what do you do with members like Turkey and Hungary, who have been holding up, the expansion of NATO for very sort of trivial reasons? Mr. Erdogan may or may not get what he wants, but the reputation and credibility of the Turkish Republic in the face of NATO allies, I would argue, is in tatters at this point.
However annoying to the other members of the alliance, his veto to Sweden's accession gave him a tremendous amount of power, though. Where does he stand within the alliance now without this sort of leverage?
Well, I don't know. I mean, sure. I mean, look, Erdogan has made some demands of allies, specifically the United States, and in that realm, as we've just mentioned, in the realm of fighter jets. Whether he gets those or not, we still don't know if that's going to happen. We'll have to wait and see. But that aside, I mean, where does Turkey go from here in its relationship with the West? Seems to be sort of what I would call very sort of leveraging, very sort of, hostage type of diplomacy with critical and traditional allies. And all for what? If Turkey had, specific demands towards European Union membership, or its continued desire to acquire new weapon systems, there was probably a way to go about this without essentially holding its Western allies hostage. This is not the best way to actually go and pursue your national interests. And I think going forward, Turkey will sort of encounter a few pebbles in its shoe in return for what it wants to achieve.
Yeah. Stoltenberg has said that Erdogan made a clear commitment to Swedish accession happening, quote, as soon as possible. Should we expect that to happen smoothly?
Again, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, from my reading of it, Mr. Erdogan has basically stated that he will now sort of refer this matter to the Turkish parliament for ratification. We'll have to see how quickly he moves on that. But we'll also have to see, what has been promised to Mr. Erdogan. What is he going to get in return for this? It can't be nothing. If it is, I'll be very surprised, simply because all this time he spent in the entire 12 months basically holding up the succession process simply because he thinks he's going to get something out of this. And if that's nothing in the immediate term, then that would be quite a surprise. So we'll have to wait and see.
Mm-hmm. In a recent article you wrote, you recommended NATO allies show some tough love to Turkey in response to what you call hostage-style diplomacy. What should and could that look like?
Look, I mean, so there's been tremendous relief in European and NATO capitals over the last several minutes since this announcement came, right? But if you look at it on face value, Turkey approving Swedish membership of NATO is not a breakthrough. It's simply doing what all other 31 members hitherto have essentially agreed to. It's not a massive sort of compromise on Turkey's part. And this is the way that Erdogan operates, basically just saying, ratcheting up tensions until the West essentially caves. And thereby Erdogan sets the agenda until he gets what he wants to achieve out of this relationship. Tough love could look like, there are numerous NATO allies, specifically Greece, for example, which are saying, look, in return for Turkey's weapon sales from the United States, could we get some assurances that Turkey won't use those fighter jets to antagonize us? What about further cooperation on Ukraine, support of Ukraine vis-a-vis the Russian invasion? What more can we ask from Turkey, specifically in the realm of sanctions enforcement against Russia? We haven't gotten any concessions out of Turkey on this level, and so I think the West, or NATO specifically, or the United States, could get a much bigger bang for its buck by essentially asking Turkey to be an actual ally and not just approve Sweden's membership, which is the bare minimum of what an ally can and should be able to do.
Well, who knows? Maybe they're listening. Sinan Jidi of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Let's cross right over to DW's Brussels bureau chief, Alexandra von Namen, who is in Vilnius tonight. Alexandra, why did President Erdogan suddenly change his mind?
This breakthrough is a real surprise because only this morning President Erdogan was not ready to drop his objections, and instead he was even making new demands linking Sweden's NATO aspirations to Turkey's ambitions to join the European Union, so talking about two different institutions. And Jens Stoltenberg talked about that in his press conference a bit, but I think to understand the decision tonight, we also need to speculate a bit. We know that President Erdogan met with the European Council President Charles Michel, that he was promised that the EU or EU members are ready to reinvigorate their relations with Turkey. He had a conversation with the US President Joe Biden. Maybe he was also then promised that the deal to buy F-16 fighter jets could be soon done deal. And of course, there were also promises made by Sweden and NATO itself. So I guess that what he was able to reach this night was a sort of package that he was satisfied with that, and in the end promised to drop his objections against Sweden's NATO membership.
Yeah, we'll learn more about the circumstances as the dust settles. This is all very recent news. Is this change of heart then linked to any conditions?
Well, there are at least two conditions that were mentioned in the press conference of NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg. One of them is the promise by NATO to establish a new special coordinator on counterterrorism, and then the promise by Sweden to work closer together with Turkey to fight terrorism. And those issues, or the matter of anti-terrorism, is very important for Turkey. I've been speaking to experts who told me that Turkey feels that NATO is not taking their concerns seriously enough. They have to deal with insurgency organizations on their soil. There has been terrorist attacks. So I think by establishing this special coordinator and by Sweden's promise to work closely together with Turkey on that matter, NATO and Sweden are taking the Turkish concerns now more seriously.
Erdogan has agreed to take this to his parliament as soon as possible. Now, with someone as unpredictable as him, that can really mean anything. Is there a timeline here?
No, we don't have a timeline yet, just a promise that Erdogan is ready to do it as soon as it is possible.
Now, Turkey wasn't the only holdout. Can we expect Hungary to follow?
Well, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg told us today that he's confident because Hungary has been saying, as he put it, that they don't want to be the last NATO country to ratify Sweden's NATO membership. But for now, we have not heard anything from the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. And of course, to make it official, to enable Sweden to be a member of the alliance, not only Turkey, but also Hungary needs to ratify Sweden's NATO membership.
That's DW's Brussels Bureau Chief Alexandra von Namen with the latest from Vilnius. Thank you so much.